I found in this notice, the testimony and evidence for the public hearing must be directed towards these criteria. Conditional use. Pursuant to SRC 240.005D, an application for conditional use permit shall be granted if all the following criteria are met. 1, the proposed use is allowed as a conditional use in the zone. 2, the reasonably likely adverse impacts of the use on the immediate neighborhood can be minimized through the imposition of conditions. And 3, the proposed use will be reasonably compatible with and have minimal impact on the livability or appropriate development of surrounding property. Class 3 site plan review. Pursuant to SRC 220.005 F3, an application for a Class C site plan review shall be granted if A, the application meets all the applicable standards of the UDC. 2, the transportation system provides for the safe, orderly, and efficient circulation of traffic onto and out of the proposed development, and negative impacts to the transportation system are mitigated adequately. C, parking areas and driveways are designated to facilitate safe and efficient movement of vehicles, bicycles, and pedestrians. And D, the proposed development will be adequately served with city water, sewer, stormwater facilities, and other utilities appropriate to the nature of the development. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the city or other parties the opportunity to respond to the issue precludes an appeal to the State Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government or its designee to respond to that issue precludes an action for damages in the circuit court. Are there any objections on jurisdictional grounds on holding of this hearing? Seeing none. This is application CU-SPR23-02, address 3997 Carson Drive Southeast and 4005 Hagers Grove Road Southeast, Salem, Oregon 97317. Ms. Donaldson, if you have the staff report.
Thank you. Let's share my screen here. Okay, good evening. I'm Jamie Donaldson, case manager for the conditional use and site plan review, case number 23-02 for 3997 Carson Drive Southeast and 4005 Hagers Grove Road Southeast. I would like to introduce the staff report and its attachments in this presentation into the record.
Received.
The request before you tonight is for a conditional use permit to allow a drive-through oil change facility, which is a motor vehicle service use in the CR zone, along with a site plan review for the addition of 3 residential units to an approved retail building. The conditional use permit is required to establish the motor vehicle services use in the CR zone. I would like to note at this time that the public hearing notice was posted on the property on March 13th, 2023, which does not comply with the public notice requirements for this application. Staff recommends that the hearings officer leave the record open for additional testimony to be provided following this public hearing. Here we have the vicinity map of the subject property. It's a development site that consists of 2 properties totaling approximately 1.5 acres in size. To the east, we have Lancaster Drive Southeast, which is a major arterial street, and to the south and curves up towards the west there is Carson Drive Southeast, a collector street, and to the north is Hagers Grove Road, a local street. This is a zoning map showing the properties are zoned CR retail commercial, represented here in red. The property is adjacent to other CR zone properties to the north, RM2 zone multifamily properties to the east, and mixed use to the south, as well as general industrial to the west. Here's an aerial photo of the property showing the existing development site on the south parcel, existing development on the south parcel, excuse me, and vacant land to the north. In January of this year, site plan review approval was issued for the development of a gas station and retail building on the north portion. The oil change facility is proposed in a vacant strip along Lancaster Drive on the south parcel. Here are some photos of the property. The top photo looking northwest from the intersection of Lancaster Drive and Carson, showing the existing retail development on site. And the bottom photo looking north, showing the vacant area to the right on that development where the oil change facility is proposed. Again, a couple of photos. This is looking southwest from Lancaster Drive. The bottom photo is looking from the northwest corner towards the vacant portion on the north parcel. The overall site plan here is part of the approval issued earlier this year for site plan review of the development of the gas station and a retail building on the north parcel. On review of that application, it was determined that the drive-through oil change facility would require a conditional use permit, which is the proposal before you tonight. The proposal also includes includes development of the motor vehicle service use for the oil change facility on the south parcel, as well as 3 additional units above a retail building on the north parcel. Looking closer at the south parcel, the applicant is proposing a drive-through oil change building of 1,888 square feet. Motor vehicle services are an allowed use within the CR zone with a conditional use permit. Thus, public review process provides an opportunity to evaluate the compatibility of a proposed use with the surrounding area to minimize any reasonably likely adverse impacts through the imposition of conditions. The development site has been approved for a motor vehicle service use with the gas station on the north parcel, where a gas station is the only exception to the conditional use requirement in the CR zone. The motor vehicle service use is proposed to operate as a drive-through facility, offering quick services and mimicking the style of gas station use already approved on site. There are similar commercial uses, including retail and gas stations just north of this site, offering services for the residential areas to the east and the south. Looking at the elevations for the oil change building, there are no windows or lighting proposed for the building along Lancaster Drive, helping to mitigate impacts to residential uses east of the site. Staff has recommended conditions of approval to prohibit outdoor storage of vehicles or vehicle parts typical of other types of motor vehicle service uses, and limiting the normal hours of operation between the hours of 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. Looking at just the north parcel closer, the applicant is proposing 3 residential units above the retail building previously approved under SPR ABJ 22-46. A 3-family residential use is allowed in the CR zone with no requirements for parking or multifamily design standards. The site plan review process ensures that any development is in compliance with the development standards of the zoning code. In general, standards include height, allowances, setbacks, off-street parking, landscape, and solid waste service area requirements, all of which were reviewed under SPR ABJ 22-46. Looking at the elevations, the new units sit right on top of the retail building, which meets all setbacks and height allowances. Therefore, staff finds the addition of 3 residential units is in compliance with the approval criteria. Here we have a couple of 3D elevation renderings showing additional view of the oil change facility building on the north picture and the mixed use building to the south, on the bottom picture, looking south, and the units would be on top of the retail building. No public testimony was provided during the public comment period from the neighborhood association or surrounding property owners and tenants. The Salem Kaiser School District provided comments for the residential units proposed. Staff recommends the hearing officer approve the conditional use permit and site plan review consolidated application subject to the recommended conditions of approval. That concludes this presentation. Thank you.
So before we hear from the applicant, I have a question about condition number 7. That's for the site plan review. I think I know what you're trying to get at, but it's a little ambiguous. Are you try to get as a condition that the city release its interest in the easement, or are you trying to have the applicant provide develop plans when they go to get their building permit that the building that's currently in that easement zone is removed from it?
This was a public works condition. Apologies that I don't have the whole staff report with me. I believe the applicant is already in the process of doing that as part of the first site plan review that went through. These conditions are just applied here as well. But I believe the first thing that you said, they're gonna quit clean the easement prior.
So the city is going to release its interest?
I believe that was the finding. Apologies.
Okay, I think that's the only question I have.
Thank you.
So now we'll hear from the applicant, if they're going to testify when they appear, state their names. It looks like there's an applicant and an agent that are on here, and I just want to make sure for the record we don't be speaking when they are here.
Hello, I'm Leonard Lauder from Student of the Architecture at 275 Court Street, Northeast. Agent for the applicant. Not going to add a whole lot to the staff report, other than to confirm that the oil change facility is very much similar in operation to the gas station in terms of vehicles coming in and leaving after having oil changed. There's no concern about parts or unused vehicles being left on the site, because it's designed basically to move operating vehicles through the system. I will add to the comment you asked about on condition 7 that we are already in process, and this is similar to a quick claim that we had to do for the original building that was on the site, so it corresponds to that. I don't think I have anything more to add to that.
So, okay, just a quick question then. What is your understanding of the time frame? So you're going to be getting the quick claim from the city prior to applying for the building permit?
Yeah, we've asked our surveyor on site to already process that. As far as I understand, it's simply paperwork to reclaim the slope easement. The slope easement will be replaced by the building foundation.
Thank you. So it doesn't look like I have anyone signed up to testify about this application. Is there anyone that didn't quite manage to get signed up in time? Do you have anyone online that testifies?
We're only doing a person testimony at this point.
Thank you. All right, so the city did request that the record remain open for 7 additional days to accommodate the error regarding the posting timelines. So because of that, I will be holding the record open. The record's going to remain open until 5 p.m. on March 29th. The applicant will then have rebuttal available until 5 p.m. on April 5th, and then the applicant has until 5 p.m. on April 12th to provide a final written argument. So I'm going to close the public hearing at this time, and I appreciate everyone that testified and appeared on behalf of this application.
Just to clarify for the record, the middle portion, the rebuttal is open to anyone who wants to rebut.
No, okay, I apologize. The rebuttal is available to anyone, including the applicant and beyond, for anything, to rebut anything that's been submitted into the record prior to March 20. My apologies, thank you. The time is 5:46, and we are going to open the hearing for case number CU-SPR 23-03. The order of tonight's proceedings will be a staff report presented by Jamie Donaldson, planner two. The applicant's presentation limited to 15 minutes, a neighborhood report, if any, limited to 10 minutes, testimony in favor, in opposition, and neutral testimony, and all testimony is limited to 5 minutes per speaker. If the applicant chooses, they may have rebuttal testimony, limited scope to issues raised in opposition, limited to 5 minutes. We'll then close the public hearing and the applicant will have an opportunity to provide a final written argument or waive that right. Persons testifying may request a continuance to address additional documents or evidence submitted in favor of the application. If this request is made, please identify the document or evidence during your testimony. I will determine whether a continuance is warranted. Persons testifying may also request that the record remain open for 7 additional days to submit additional written evidence. I want to direct your attention now to the applicable criteria found in the notice. The testimony and evidence for the public hearing must be directed towards these criteria. Conditional use permit. Pursuant to SRC 240-005D, an application for conditional use permit shall be granted if all the following criteria are met. 1, the proposed use is allowed as a conditional use in the zone. 2, the reasonably likely adverse impacts of the use on the immediate neighborhood can be minimized through the imposition of conditions. And 3, the proposed use be reasonably compatible with and have minimal impact on the livability or appropriate development of the surrounding property. Class 3 site plan review. Pursuant to SRC 220.005F3, an application for Class 3 site plan review shall be granted if A, the application meets all applicable standards of the UDC. B, the transportation system provides for the safe, orderly, and efficient circulation of traffic into and out of the proposed development, and negative impacts to the transportation system are mitigated adequately. C, parking areas and driveways are designated to facilitate safe and efficient movement of vehicles, bicycles, and pedestrians. And D, the proposed development will be adequately served with city water, sewer, stormwater facilities, and other utilities appropriate to the nature of the development. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the city or other parties the opportunity to respond to the issues precludes an appeal to the State Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to the proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government boards designated to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in the circuit court. Are there any objections on jurisdictional grounds on the holding of this hearing? Seeing none. Again, this is case or application CU-SPR 23-03, address 17177 Freeway Court Northeast, Salem, Oregon 97301. Ms. Donaldson, if you can have the staff report.
Thank you. 1 second. Okay, good evening. I'm Jamie Donaldson, case manager for the conditional use and site plan review, case number 23-03. I would like to introduce the staff report and its attachments and this presentation into the record.
Admitted. Admitted, thank you.
The request before you tonight is a conditional use permit to allow a used car dealership, which is a motor vehicle sales use in the MU3 zone. The development site consists of 2 properties totaling approximately 1.4 acres in size. The property is surrounded by streets on 3 sides, with Hawthorne Avenue Northeast, a major arterial to the west, Market Street Northeast, a major arterial to the south, and abutting Freeway Court Northeast to the north. It also has the freeway ramp to the east, which is not designated a street, but it's a right-of-way. This is a zoning map showing the properties are zoned MU3, mixed use 3, represented here in purple. The property is adjacent to other MU3 zone properties on all sides, with CR, retail, commercial on the other side of the freeway to the east. Here we have an aerial photo of the property showing the existing development, Newport Seafood Grill Restaurant, which has been vacant for some time on the west parcel, and the associated parking on the east parcel. Some photos of the property on the top there, we have the looking at the building at the intersection of Market Street and Hawthorne Avenue. On the bottom there is the view from Market Street looking at the parking lot. The top view here is looking from Freeway Port Northeast to the development, and the bottom is in the parking lot looking at the primary facade of the existing building. The proposal includes development of a new motor vehicle sales use tenant space of 3,268 square feet, where the rest of the building will remain as a restaurant use. The applicant is proposing changes to the existing parking area to accommodate a vehicle display lot. Motor vehicle sales are allowed in the MU3 zone with a conditional use permit. The public review process provides an opportunity to evaluate the compatibility of a proposed use with the surrounding area to minimize any reasonably likely adverse impacts through the imposition of conditions. The Market Street corridor has several existing motor vehicle sales use, with one such establishment located just west of the subject property. The most likely, there are several hotels located directly adjacent to the property and across Market Street, so the most likely adverse impact from the use would be with lighting. Staff is recommending that the hearings officer adopt a condition of approval limiting the normal hours of operation between the hours of 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. Vehicle display area lighting shall be turned off outside of these hours to limit the impact of light. A condition of approval is also recommended to provide cast or wrought iron fencing instead of the chain link proposed to mitigate visual impacts of the site. The site plan review process ensures that any new development is in compliance with the development standards of zoning code. In general, standards include height allowances, setbacks, off-street parking, landscaping, solid waste area. Because this is an existing building, there are no changes proposed to the building setbacks. There are changes to the vehicle display lot, which is exempt from providing most vehicle parking standards like landscaping. There is a condition of approval to increase the setback of the non-conforming vehicle setback abutting the east property line. The applicant has provided parking for both tenant spaces that will be on site for the restaurant use and the used car sales for customer parking. The applicant did not request any adjustments to any development standards of the underlying zone, parking standards, or the general development standards. And with the recommended conditions of approval, staff finds that the application is in compliance with the approval criteria. In the MU3 zone, there are pedestrian-oriented design standards. Because it's an existing building, the applicant has proposed as many as that they can comply with. They have proposed They did propose a pedestrian connection from the corner entrance of the building, even though the primary facade faces east towards the vehicle display lot. There is an entrance on the south side of the building, which we can see here on the elevations, and they proposed a pedestrian connection to the intersection there. The tenant space for the used car dealership already has several windows, complying with the ground floor window standard. For the MU3 zone, there's a condition in place just for transparency of those windows. We have more elevations here for the facade facing Hawthorne and north facing parking lot. No public testimony was provided during the public comment period from the neighborhood association or surrounding property owners or tenants or public agency. Staff recommends that the hearings officer approve the conditional use permit and site plan review consolidated application subject to the recommended conditions of approval. That concludes the presentation. Thank you.
So I just have one quick question about condition 1, which is installing the cast iron or wrought iron fencing in lieu of the chain link fence. Can you just one more time explain what visual impacts are being mitigated by imposing that condition?
Visually, aesthetically, they typically, the vehicle display lot, I spoke to the applicant after, and they said they might not even do the fencing at all. But because it's a conditional use permit, we'd like to reasonably mitigate any impacts. Also, the pedestrian connection has a gate, which has been conditioned to remain open. But because it's a vehicle display lot, they do want to be on display, and so they would like to have a see-through fence, and a wrought iron could accomplish that.
So related to your comment about the applicant indicating they might not put up a fence, would the condition be better that if the applicant installs a fence, it shall be of cast iron or wrought iron material, or do you want, are you suggesting that the condition is that they must install a fence?
We can rephrase that. It's not that they must install a fence.
Thank you, those are my questions.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Good evening.
Oh, my apologies. So we're gonna hear from the applicant now, and before you begin speaking, just make sure that you state your names so that we know who you are for the record. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Ronald Head. I'm a project architect. My business is at 1220 20th Street Southeast, Suite 120. I'd like to thank staff for helping us get the application together quickly and efficiently. And we really don't have any to add to the presentation other than the available questions.
Thank you. I don't think I have any questions for you. So now would be the time for public testimony. It doesn't look like anyone signed up on the sign-up sheet before we started this. So is there anyone here that's here to testify either in favor, in opposition, or as neutral testimony towards this application? Great, see none. Does the applicant waive the 7-day period to submit additional written argument?
Yes.
That's a yes for the record. The public hearing is now closed. I hope to have my findings submitted back to the city within the 10-day period. Okay, the time is 6 o'clock, and this is case number CU-SPR-ADJ-DR 23-04. Tonight's order of proceeding will be the staff report presented by Aaron Panko, Planner 3. The applicant's presentation limited to 15 minutes, a neighborhood report, if any, limited to 10 minutes. Testimony in favor of the application, testimony in opposition, and testimony that is neutral. All testimony is limited to 5 minutes in scope. After that, rebuttal by applicant, limited in scope to issues raised in opposition, also limited to 5 minutes. At that point, we'll close the public hearing. The applicant will be able to get the opportunity to provide final written argument unless they waive that right. Persons testifying may request a continuance to address additional documents or evidence submitted in favor of the application. If this request is made, please identify the new document or evidence during the testimony, and I will determine whether continuance is warranted. Persons testifying may also request that the record remain open for 7 additional days to submit additional written evidence. I want to direct your attention now to the applicable criteria found in the notice. The testimony and evidence for the public hearing must be directed towards these criteria. Conditional use permit. Pursuant to SRC 240.005D, An application for conditional use permit shall be granted if all the following criteria are met. 1, the proposed use is allowed as a conditional use in the zone. 2, the reasonably likely adverse impacts of the use on the immediate neighborhood can be minimized through imposition of conditions. And 3, the proposed use will be reasonably compatible with and have minimal impact on the livability or appropriate development of the surrounding property. Class 3 site plan review permit. Pursuant to SRC 220.005F3, an application for a Class 3 site plan review shall be granted if A, the application meets all the applicable standards of the UDC, B, the transportation system provides for the safe, orderly, and efficient circulation of traffic into and out of the proposed development, and negative impacts to the transportation system are mitigated adequately. C, parking areas and driveways are designated to facilitate safe and efficient movement of vehicles, bicycles, and pedestrians. And D, the proposed development will be adequately served with city water, sewer, stormwater facilities, and other utilities appropriate to the nature of the development. Class 2 adjustment. Pursuant to SRC 250.005D2, an application for a Class 2 adjustment shall be granted if all the following criteria are met. A, the purpose of the underlying specific development standard proposed for the adjustment is 1, or I, clearly inapplicable to the proposed development, or II, equally or better met by the proposed development. B, if located within a residential zone, the proposed development will not detract from the livability or appearance of the residential area. And C, if more than one adjustment has been requested, the cumulative effect of all the adjustments result in a project which is still consistent with the overall purpose of that zone. Class 1 design review. Pursuant to SRC 225.005E1, an application for a Class 1 design review shall be approved if all the applicable design review standards are met. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the city or other parties the opportunity to respond to that issue precludes an appeal to the State Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional and other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow local government or its designee to respond to that issue precludes an action for damages in the circuit court. Are there any objections on jurisdictional grounds of the holding of this meeting? Seeing none. This is case CU-SPR-ADJ-DR23-04, address 4900 block of State Street, Salem, Oregon 97301. Mr. Pinko, who have staff.
Thank you, and good evening. My name is Aaron Pinko with the Planning Division. This is conditional use, site plan review, adjustment, and design review case number CU-SPR-ADJ-DR2304 for the 4900 block of State Street. At this time, I'd like to enter into the record the staff report, including its attachments. I'd like to note also that we received testimony from East Lancaster Neighborhood Association, and we received several documents too from the applicant. They should have been forwarded and included in the record.
I am in possession of those documents and they are admitted to the record.
Thank you. And I'm not sure what's going on. I don't have it on here. Let's see. I'm not sure what's going on for the video.
You'll need to reshare.
There's no. Okay, this looks better. I think we're back on track. This is a vicinity map of the property. The portion of property that's proposed for development is approximately 1.74 acres in size. It has frontage along State Street to the south. State Street is designated as a major arterial in Salem Transportation System Plan. To the east of the property is Portal Road, which is designated as a parkway. And the property also has frontage to the west along Greencrest Street, which is a future collector street under construction currently. And the urban growth boundary for the city is along Portland Road. This is a zoning map for the property. The property is zoned CR retail commercial. Surrounding property to the east is zoned CR retail commercial. This entire area was rezoned to a combination of commercial, multifamily, and single-family designations as part of voter-approved annexation back in 2010. The proposed development of the 42-unit multifamily residential use occurs on just the retail commercial zone portion of property. And then see the property to the south of State Street that's not shaded is outside city limits. It's in Marion County. It's primarily developed with single-family dwellings. To the west, let's see, like along here, that's not shaded also is within Marion County. It's occupied by a manufactured dwelling park. This is an aerial photo of the property. The larger area here is part of the East Park Plan Unit development, which is under construction and includes 600 plus dwelling units. You can see from the photo, Green Crest is under construction, and there's some other construction activity occurring around the area. This property also has some significant trees located at the northern end. And let's see, there's several approvals that have occurred on this development site too. With the plan unit development, there was approval for a 36 dwelling unit multifamily apartment complex just to the north of the site. And then to the east, there's a 291 dwelling unit apartment complex that was approved last year. And this portion is going to connect in with some of that existing development. And this is a photo from Google showing the existing conditions. Again, they're much further along than this for the development, but the site would be right around here. So the applicant previously applied for the conditional use permit for development of phase 1 Spark Apartments in 2021. That was the 291 units. The application was initially denied by the hearings officer. It was appealed to the city council, who issued a final order in April 2022, denying the application as well. The applicant appealed the city's decision to the Land Use Court of Appeals. LUBA issued a final order reversing the denial and requiring the city to approve the development application, finding in part that pursuant to ORS 197, that the discretionary approval criteria for a conditional use permit cannot be applied to applications for housing. As a result of the LUBA decision, the city council adopted ordinance 22-22. It was effective or adopted on November 28th, 2022. And the ordinance removed multifamily residential uses as an allowed use in the CR zone and a few other zones, except for multifamily uses when they're located in a mixed-use building. So this particular application was submitted prior to the effective date of the ordinance. So at the time of submittal, multifamily was allowed as a conditional use permit. However, you'll see in our findings that the conditional use permit are inapplicable to this application for housing. The site plan review process ensures that any new development is in compliance with the development standards of the zoning code. In general, standards include maximum building height allowances, setbacks, off-street parking standards, landscaping, and solid waste service area requirements. Pursuant to chapter Salem Revised Code, chapter 220, site plan review application shall be granted if the applicant meets all applicable standards of the UDC. And the staff report provides an analysis of applicable standards to this project, and it's found to comply with those standards. Some things to note is that this particular phase, the 42 units, will connect to the previously approved abutting 291 unit apartment complex and the 36 unit apartment complex to the north. So those connections include shared pedestrian access, shared amenities, including open space, the office and recreation areas, and the off-street parking areas will also be shared for these developments. The applicant has requested 2 adjustments to the multifamily design standards in Chapter 702, including an adjustment to allow the setback distance to increase next to State Street and Greencrest Street, and an adjustment to eliminate the direct pedestrian access standard for dwelling units placed adjacent to State Street and Greencrest. Staff is recommending that the variance officer approve the adjustment to increase the maximum building setback requirement adjacent to both State Street and Greencrest. And staff is supportive of the request to remove the direct pedestrian access requirement to State Street, given its street classification, but is recommending that the variance officer adopt a condition of approval that requires the applicant to provide direct pedestrian access for the buildings along Greencrest Street in compliance with the multifamily standard. And multifamily residential development is subject to design review standards, Salem Revised Code Chapter 702, which provides additional standards for open space, landscaping, site safety and security, parking, site design, and the building facade design. With the exception of the adjustments that the applicant has requested, the development proposal otherwise demonstrates compliance with all of the standards, and staff is recommending that the variance officer approve the request. During the public comment period, we didn't receive any public comments. We did in the last day receive comments from the East Lancaster Neighborhood Association. In summary, there was some I think early opposition to this project in the larger area. So they had some concerns about driveway entrances, configuration of streets, parking, and potential traffic conflicts. And they were also asking for some street crossings and work with the transit on some potential locations. And the applicant has been in conversations with Chariots, our transit agency, on some location for future bus routes. And the applicant is also working with the Public Works Department. I don't know if there's any crossings that I can note on Greencrest. The applicant may be able to speak to that. And then staff is recommending again that the hearings officer approve the application of the recommended conditions of approval.
Thank you. I don't have any questions.
Thank you.
Now it's time for the applicant's testimony. If you could please let us know what your name is and what your relationship is to this application for the record before you get speaking.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Aaron. My name is Joseph Schaefer. I'm a land use paralegal at Jordan Ramus, here to speak on behalf of the applicant. My address is 1211 Southwest 5th Avenue, 27th floor, Portland, 97204. Aaron did a good job summarizing the project. I'm just going to raise a couple points to highlight where this group of 42 apartments fits in the overall picture. You saw some of his exhibit maps showing that these apartments are essentially at the southwest corner of the larger site. I emailed Aaron today a draft of the upcoming plat. I'd like to bring the paper one up to the hearings officer so she can see it while I'm describing how these fit. That's okay?
That's fine. That's fine.
Now, the hearings officer may recall from the approval for the 291 apartments that at that time, there was consideration of commercial development down where these apartments are proposed today. And in that last application, we proposed a property line essentially between the commercial and the 291 apartments. This proposal essentially eliminates that property line, which never got approved, never was platted or otherwise adjusted or created. So we're in the original condition in terms of where the property lines are. You can see this on the second or third page of the city council's decision approving the 291 apartments. And we've also submitted an exhibit. I don't know, did you show the exhibit of the property line that we sent? Do you have a way to put that up on the screen? Okay, so what we have is a north-south internal property boundary. And all of this is about, I should have warmed up, all of this is about what do we do about that internal property boundary. The prior decision did not include any condition about that boundary, of any kind. It, in our view, correctly spoke about that boundary as if it didn't exist. We have created an exhibit which Eric is trying to pull up for you. It shows where this property boundary is today. These are old meets and bounds lots from many decades ago, when this site was all owned by Pixel.
Zach, it's not necessarily here again.
For anyone listening, we're pausing to try to get some get the screen to show some exhibits. Yes, thank you. I'm not sure. Okay, thank you. So now we have this exhibit up on the screen, and it shows in bold the north-south property line at issue. And the concern expressed by Aaron, we understand that, is that the line abuts the parking spaces over on the west side of the site. As I understand it, there is a 5-foot setback requirement between parking spaces and the property line. When the plat gets recorded, okay, that property line is going to go away. And so that's the sheet that I dropped out for you, which is one of the pages from the draft Phase 3 plat. The Phase 3 plat is going to include single-family lots, which is lot 337 on the sheet that I provided you. It's going to include the new public park, which is lot 338 on that sheet. And then it's going to include one lot for all the apartments you see on this plan, and that is lot 339 on the upcoming Phase 3 plan. So the first condition is written to require recording of the plat prior to issuance of any building permits or civil permits for these 42 apartments. And that creates some uncomfortable items from our perspective that I'm going to take a minute to explain. First of all, the west edge of these 42 apartments is Greencrest Street. Greencrest Street is already constructed. It has curbs, it has stormwater, it has sanitary sewer and water. It is fully paved, including both lifts, has some temporary striping on it, but not permanent striping. And the intersection at the south end of Greencrest where it meets State Street is not yet constructed. So it's a little bit awkward to have a condition of approval that says you won't have any civil permits issued when your street frontage, except for the sidewalk, has already been constructed. So we wanna make sure that the city and the hearings officer understand that that's a bit of an unusual situation. The other issue is that the 291 apartments already have their land use approval without a similar condition. So in other words, if we wanted to pull the civil or building permits for those apartments tomorrow, there's no requirement regarding this property line or this phase 3 plat to slow that down. So we could be faced with a situation where we have authority to build all our 291 apartments, but not these last 42. So we're trying to find a way to work around a condition number 1. And what I have submitted for the record, I'm not sure if you've seen it yet, is a sample of a covenant from the City of Portland. I'm not sure if the hearings officer is familiar with the City of Portland, but the vast majority of it, at least the historical parts, are all platted into lots that have 8 blocks on them. The office building that I work in sits on 8 lots. And so you have these situations arise where people want to build across internal property boundaries like we have here, and they run into all sorts of setback issues in the zoning code and then also building code issues about firewalls and so forth. So at least in Portland, what you're allowed to do is provide a covenant to assure that the lots at issue will not be sold separately. When you think about what the plat is going to accomplish, the plat is going to ensure that the property on both sides of that line on the screen will remain in unified ownership. And so the covenant essentially says the same thing, okay? And then you'll see in the sample, it has a provision that I think I haven't read it for this issue, but they used to say, if you are going to divide the ownership, essentially break the covenant, here's what you have to do on the ground first, okay? So in the case of the sample that you have, it was one large building designed for maintenance and repair of heavy tractor trailers, truck repair shop with a parking garage on the roof. So the covenant specifies that if you want to segregate the ownership, you got to build a firewall and so forth and so on. So in this case, we would propose a covenant that would specify, if the properties were to be segregated, you would need to do the sort of things that condition 1 is now proposing with the new text. In other words, you have to get a land use approval to have a property line right next to parking spaces. I'm sure that's all very confusing. I think I'll pause and invite any questions right now.
So I have a copy of what's on the screen currently in front of me. I don't believe I am in possession of the example covenant unless it's been marked something else in my files, but I don't believe I reviewed it. I saw other easements that are associated with the property, but not your example covenant.
Okay.
So was that something that you emailed to Mr. Pinko prior to?
Yes. Oh. Not recalling. Which one was it? Which you wrote? Oh, gosh. A couple days ago. Today or yesterday.
Let's see.
Pretty sure
I
I have.
have phase 3 draft plat. I have the decision from the 20 or 29 apartments. Prior to that, I have a pipeline easement, I have a recorded street and roadway easement.
Right.
And I have the East Park Department internal boundary exhibit.
And Aaron, I have those 3 I have all 4 of those as well.
You have some stuff where it said draft only, not for the record.
Can you open it and tell me if it's a covenant?
Site plan.
There were some preliminary drafts of this exhibit that's on the screen that I sent in for discussion purposes.
Got a tax lot map,
Mhm.
and then 1-290,
That's it.
want to put this on the record.
Yes. Yes.
Just one quick, Mr. Pingo, if it's not a problem, if you could email it to me, I will pull it up on my phone so I can kind of look at it while the hearing is open, so that if I have any questions, I can direct those towards the applicant.
Thank you. Again, the purpose. Excuse me. The purpose of the covenant is to allow buildings and development to straddle internal property lines. And it's used in, obviously, typically in urban context, where you have lots of internal property lines that are smaller than the development site. This example is from Block 290, which is one of the super blocks in Northwest Portland. Each of those blocks is comprised, I believe, of 18 individual lots that are 50 by 100. In addition, you see the legal description involves a portion of a vacated street. So you've got 18 lots and you've got a building that the footprint of the building is on, well, I'm going to guess 10 or 11 of those lots. And so it's kind of similar to this project in that the client was redeveloping a building multifamily on a portion of the property, and then the other side, Block 290 East, is being set aside for a public park. So the question was, we're creating property lines. We found all these old historic lots still platted, and we're trying to set it up so we could give a park to the city, build an apartment building. It's about 200 units over retail. And then how do we handle this existing building, which sits over maybe 12 or so of the 18 lots, given that it doesn't meet setbacks and so forth and so on. So at least in Portland, the solution is the covenant, which you have in front of you, which focuses mostly on the building code issues, but again, it also covers zoning setback issues. The building, if you want to look it up, it still shows up on the Google Maps aerial, but the building itself has been demolished and the apartments are under construction as we speak. So that's the concept. We understand that to ensure those parking spaces do not create a setback issue, there needs to be unified ownership. There are a couple ways to do that unified ownership. The plat is what we are planning, and I believe we're pretty much obligated to do by our PUD approval and our agreement with the city to donate the park. So it's going to happen. We propose this covenant, and my request is to leave the record open for 7 days in order to allow the lawyers in my office to prepare an actual covenant for this situation, so that the staff and the hearings officer and maybe Fred can have a look at it and see if they think it works. We think that's the best solution. Another potential option would be to provide a no-build easement along the just east of that property line, and perhaps a no-build as well as an access easement to ensure that the apartments on the west half of the property line have the right to use the drive aisle to get into their parking spaces. That is similar to the condition on the approval for the 291 apartments, which required an easement for the drive aisle between the 291 apartments at Greencrest. So there's a couple different ways to ensure that the parking spaces, the people that want to come and go from those parking spaces, can use the property on the east side of that bold line. But we think the covenant to not sell the properties separately and to preserve that in unified ownership is the best way to handle that. I'll pause again here for questions.
I don't have questions for you about that request.
Okay, well, thank you. The other issue that I would like to comment on is the staff recommendation of denial of our request for an adjustment to not have sidewalks between Greencrest and the backs of those 4 apartment buildings that front on Greencrest. This is not a huge issue for us, but we think of it in terms of safety and security. Those will be the back entrances of apartments where people have, small patios and barbecues and space for, pets and children to play and so forth. So having that open essentially and easy to access from Greencrest, creates a bit of a security issue for the residents in those units. And that is the reason why we asked for the adjustment. And we would like to have your support for that. We note that there are no similar sidewalks along Corden Road and State. We realize that Corden Road and State are larger arterials as compared to Greencrest. But Greencrest is a collector. It's going to serve almost 1,000 units of housing. It's going to be a fairly busy street, and we would like to have that little bit extra bit of buffer, so to speak, for those apartments that face that street. With that, I'll invite any other questions.
So the other side of Greencrest at this point is going to be all residential development, so the west side.
Yes, single family, yes.
And then to the north, other than more apartments in the park, further north on Greencrest, will there be residential before it gets to the next intersecting street, or what is going to be up there?
It's all single family. So what you see on the screen is all the apartments. These 330 some apartments are the only apartments in the overall project. So everything else on Greencrest all the way up to Auburn, which is the north boundary of the development, is single family. And then you see Stella Street coming into the north edge of the apartment site. Between Stella and Corden is where the park is. It's about a 5-acre park.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Is there any other testimony you'd like to provide?
No, thank you.
All right, thank you. So I don't see that anyone has signed up for public testimony. I just want to see and make sure that there's no one here that wants to testify that just didn't get a chance to sign up yet. Great, seeing none. I do have a question for Mr. Pinko, if he can stand up to the podium so he can be heard on record. So my question is about condition 1, and if you could explain to me why for condition 1 that it exists, let's see right here. So it says it exists for in a response to SCR 522.010A lot standards, and it says no minimum lot area dimensions required in the CR zone. All uses are required to have a minimum of 16 feet of street frontage. And then you find that the subject property is part of a PUD and that phase 3 of that has not been recorded prior to issuance of any civil site work or building permits for proposed development, the final plat creating this lot should be recorded, and that's what you include as a condition. How does that condition help satisfy the lot standard?
Sure. So the development proposal was submitted to the city, assuming the property boundaries of the recorded subdivision. So that was the lot development standard that this project was evaluated for. Now, you can see on the photo here, there are two fairly large existing properties, and this one goes kind of right between those. That's the property line that was mentioned previously. With a project like this, you know, of note is the setback issue to the property line. There's minimum lot, like open space requirements for multifamily. It was evaluated again based on the recorded lot. It wasn't evaluated based on these larger pieces here. So that's why we conditioned it the way we did. If we had a development proposal that showed this to be our existing condition, we could have looked at it for, you know, how does this work with minimum landscape requirements, minimum open space, on unit density, and applied adjustments as needed. So I was in conversation with the applicant the last few days here, and I think we have an alternative condition that would allow the applicant to either record the plat, so meeting our lot standards or lot development standards as we applied in the staff report. Or alternatively, they could ask for adjustments to any of these standards that may be in conflict if we're looking at the existing conditions of these two larger lots. So that would potentially give them a path, and it would need an adjustment maybe for some of those standards, but it would give them a path to get building permits prior to the plat reporting. We did take a look at the CCNRs covenants that the applicant mentioned that other cities do, and again, there's not a process that we can accept those to remove the zoning requirement, so the process would be by an adjustment.
Okay. For the record, I am in receipt of those CCNRs that were submitted as an example, and I have reviewed them while this while the applicant was providing testimony. So going back to, you said that you might have some alternate conditions that you're going to put forward. The second one sounded like it might require additional applications by the applicant.
Correct.
How would that impact what's before me right now in terms of would the applicant need to withdraw despite having this public hearing, or would that be something that I'm trying to figure out, you know, while I've got it in front of me, what that would result in terms of what's before me right now, and trying to make sure that if, you know, that seems like the better route, or that's what I decide to go, that we're not mucking up kind of the process and having put this on hold while something else goes or something to that effect.
My guess is that the project won't substantially change from what we're seeing here. So the configuration of buildings, parking is going to be what it is. So I think the findings can clarify that there's an alternative process here that would allow for adjustments based on just looking at the property values differently than what is evaluated before. So rather than, you know, the recorded lot, we'd be looking at the existing conditions. So I think they would not need an adjustment or a modification of conditional use permit, site plan review, design review. I think they would just need an additional adjustment.
So what you're saying is that one potential path forward would be to, assuming I do this, would be to approve what is provided in the staff report in terms of how to handle the two different adjustments that are before me, and then the solution would then be for the applicant to submit a separate application for the adjustment. Okay. All right, I think those are my questions. Thank you. Because I've asked questions of staff, I want to give the applicant the opportunity to rebut if they would like.
Thank you, Madam Hearings Officer Joseph Schaefer, again for the applicant. Rebut doesn't seem like the right word. I just wanted to say that I agree with Aaron. His substitute condition 1 would allow the hearings officer to approve the application with a condition to require an adjustment to the parking space setback and perhaps some other adjustment that we haven't thought of that may come out of the woodwork. And so yes, we're aligned that is one path. It's not our preferred path. In response to the comment that he made that the zoning code does not include a provision that would allow a covenant to substitute for a zoning standard. My point is that it depends how you define a property line. I'm not familiar with how the city's customary procedure for dealing with developments that straddle property lines is, but I'd be very surprised if the city does not have a history where you have buildings that do straddle property lines. It's just kind of what happens, and over the history of development, lots get platted and then they get built. Imagine City Hall where we are today. Once upon a time, had a couple dozen houses on it. Mark may know that history. But then as land gets aggregated and built, property lines sometimes are in the way. And again, my request is to leave the record open. We'll have the covenant drafted and submitted, and you guys can have an internal review and sort of decide that among yourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Because no one else was here to provide testimony, no one else needs to provide any rebuttal to questions to staff and the applicant's quasi-rebuttal based on those staff questions. Based on the request by the applicant to hold the record open, the record will remain open until 5 p.m. on March 29th. Rebuttal to anything submitted prior to March 29th will be open until 5 p.m. on April 5th, and then the applicant will have until 5 p.m. on April 12th to provide a final written argument. The public hearing is now closed. Thank you, everyone.